I'm Eric Wolf, and my experience in business peer groups has changed my life, especially my membership in Vistage, one of the world's largest CEO advisory groups. I'm an entrepreneur, a business owner, and a Vistage speaker on the power of marketing. This podcast is dedicated to the people who make those experiences possible, the peer group chairs. Every episode, I interview a Vistage Chair who has dedicated their time to helping entrepreneurs like me succeed. Welcome to Chairwaves. My guest today is Melissa Edison Barnes, who has a 25-year history of building companies. She is a second-generation entrepreneur, and she is an emerging Vistage Chair here in the great state of Colorado. And welcome, Melissa. So happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Eric. I'm very excited to be here.
You are currently, as we're recording this, and hey, who knows what happens by the time this gets shared, but as we're talking, you are currently in the process of building your first CE group, which is also coincidentally your first group period. Congratulations on that. What's the experience of that like for you? Let's just rip off the Band-Aid and get into it. What is going through your mind as you're going through this process of starting your first group?
Yeah, well, it's been a lot of work because there's a lot more research than I thought there would be. And really, I guess I didn't realize how much of it was like putting together a puzzle that hasn't really been built yet, because the way Vistage mandates the groups, everything has to be very non-competitive. So non-competitive vertically, horizontally. So, that's part of what I'm looking for in terms of the different industry representation that I want in the group. But then I'm also trying to find just diversity across all different kinds of levels in terms of business size, backgrounds of leaders, leadership strength. And so as I'm starting to build the group, I have 5 leaders already signed up. I have one that I think is just going to sign. So that's 6 kind of real clear kind of pieces on the board. And then it just takes a lot of thought and research to kind of curate all of the pieces around them. And that creativity and tenacity and like just digging into like researching that curation process is just work that I just didn't quite understand, but it's also so interesting because I am finding out about so many different kinds of businesses. And so, the business environment is evolving so much. So it's been as much of a research experience as it has been just, fun, educational for me to see what's going on in Colorado.
And obviously you decided that you were going to do this. You went through Chair Academy, which in talking to folks, I know probably prepares you for some realities of being a chair more than others. What's something that's been, as you're going through this process of getting started, what's something that's been easier than you expected, and what's something that's been harder than you expected?
The upfront research, just the amount of work it takes to go into finding those people that you want to do the original outreach to, that just has taken so much longer because I have found that it's easier for me to authentically reach out to someone if I know a little bit about them and I already know that they kind of like fit somehow into my puzzle. So that's something that I just didn't quite anticipate. The thing that I think has been so amazing and started at Chair Academy is just, we are out there building a community for our leaders that we're inviting to participate into our group. But there is also an amazing community of Vistage chairs locally in Colorado. And I also have a community of the people that I went to Academy with. And then there are just, other communities of Vistage people that I'm constantly engaging in. And so the depth and the richness of the Vistage community has been something that I just didn't anticipate. And I've been really appreciative of.
And here in Colorado, and I don't, and I think that there's a lot of folks that don't know this, that aren't here in our community and in our Vistage community. But Colorado has one of the most vibrant, I would say vibrant, Vistage communities in the whole country. I mean, we have more chairs here than in the New York tri-state area, which is a really weird thing to say out loud, given the relative size of New York versus Colorado. What would you, and I wonder how that has played into your experience being a new chair. Are you aware of that, or have you
Yeah.
noticed that, or how has your life been different?
Um, I don't know if my life has been different, but I knew that Colorado was a very strong Vistage community. I myself was a Vistage member for over 8 years and had the opportunity over that time to work with two different chairs for an extended period of time, and then an additional third chair. So I am very tied into the Vistage community here in Colorado,
Should we give
but
a
it is
should we give
growing.
a shout out to your previous chairs?
Well, they're both retired, but you can. Lisa Rogi and Greg Bem were my two chairs, and I was, so grateful to work with them. And they're both very much still mentors of mine, and really one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I'm very, very grateful
Awesome.
for them. But as you mentioned, Colorado and Denver is a really strong Visage community. And there are, I think, four other building chairs in Denver right now. So that is, in some ways, you could view them as like, this is a mid-sized market. We already have so many chairs. We already have so many groups. Like, you could look at that as a competitive challenge. But it is true that there are so many businesses that are not yet involved in Vistage, and there are so many people that have not yet even heard of peer advisory. So there is room, and I see that room every day when I encounter new CEOs that have never heard of Vistage or have never heard of peer advisory. So there is a lot of room to grow, and frankly, I would love to see the Vistage community, get bigger and even stronger. And I don't have any concerns that that's a possibility.
Cool. Well, that's good to know. Um, so tell me about. I would love to hear about, because everybody has no, nobody stepped out of their into their first job and said, you know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a Vistage chair. So Vistage chairs famously have typically one or even two or more careers before they become Vistage chairs. I would love to hear about your journey and where you started, where you thought you were going to be going, and where you actually ended up.
Yeah, well, thank you. You mentioned in your short introduction that I'm a second generation entrepreneur. And I guess my journey really started at my kitchen table when as long back as I can remember, because my father was a World War II vet, came back from Europe and had to take over his family business at the age of 24 because of health reasons of his father, and ran that family business and eventually bought his family out. But it was always a small business in the textile industry. And as you know, or may know, in the 80s, the US textile industry just disappeared. And as much as my dad tried to diversify, which he did, and he was really an amazing business person, he in the end ended up going bankrupt with that small business. And I remember kind of being just kind of tortured sitting around the kitchen table, not knowing how to be helpful. And yet my sister, my mother, and I were my dad's advisory board. We were the ones that he came home to and, talked about his challenges with his vendors and with the market and with tariffs. And so he was an amazing business person and ended up turning things around and ended up starting another business and eventually sold that to a Fortune 1000 company. So, I really saw the breadth and depth and, tragedy and triumph of, small business, and ended up going to graduate school, which was amazing because neither one of my parents had graduated from college, and then went to work in the corporate sector. And I guess I kind of thought that I would stay there. I mean, I had the opportunity to work in really brand name
What was
companies
your
that
first corporate
products
job?
were known. General Mills. So I was a brand manager on the Wheaties products.
Okay,
Yep. Got
very
to meet
cool.
lots of people that got their faces on Wheaties boxes, and my product was a sub product.
Mary Lou
What?
Retton, come on.
I did not meet Mary Lou Retton, but I did meet Michael Jordan.
Oh, that's
That was very
amazing.
cool. I have a picture with Michael Jordan. I went to two Super Bowls, so that was cool. And then from General Mills, I went to Harley-Davidson. So I had a couple years working on the motor clothes brands at Harley-Davidson. So I had great experience. But then I moved to Colorado and I had the opportunity to work for the very first email engine. So people don't really realize this, but someone way back when had to actually create the technology that allowed us to send bulk emails. So I take personal responsibility for, all the stress that we all face now for these endless amounts of emails that come in. But I worked for the first company that created that capability. And when I was there, with two colleagues, we kind of realized that email wasn't really being leveraged as a marketing tool, and there was an opportunity to do that. And so we left that company, and that was my first startup, where we started an email marketing consulting company. And then from there, I just really, I guess, tapped into my genetic code of being an entrepreneur and loved that sense of creating something, finding a niche, building out the infrastructure. And that was kind of the start of my career as an entrepreneur and startup person. And I've had the opportunity to work really across different like B2B markets, B2C markets, and then exited a company and had an opportunity to run a few investor-backed businesses. And I guess that's what led. And when I was running some of my small businesses, I was a Vistage member. I was struggling kind of as my dad was. And someone introduced this idea of peer advisory. And I joined and was a member for over 8 years. And my group helped me grow my business and then exit it successfully. And I really just was so, I don't know, that community of CEOs that were all facing kind of similar challenges. And at the time, I was running a small business, and there were some people in that group that were running much, much larger businesses. But it just provided kind of this endless education opportunity, but also just this group of peers that I could kind of just ask any question and know that I wouldn't be judged or, get, any kind of biased feedback. So it was a tremendous forum for me. And then when I was running some of the investor-backed businesses, it really was apparent that that was not my true calling. It's kind of hard to run somebody else's businesses after you've run your own. And that's when I kind of stopped and really reevaluated what I wanted to do. And I just love this space of small businesses where we're really giving back to our communities in terms of jobs and resources. And I just feel so strongly about these leaders that take that challenge on, like my dad did, like I did, like the people that were in my Vistage group. And it just seemed like the right place for me to kind of turn around my experience over my life and do this now.
So I'd like to go back, if we can, for just a few minutes to the part where you exited your business, and of course, this is something that many Vistage members do, and that as you grow and run your groups, that people in your group will either do or aspire to do. What advice, being that you went through it, I'd be interested in hearing what went well and what went less well for you as you were going through that process, and what advice you would give one of your members that ends up kind of going through something similar.
Yeah, I think you really have to have a clear reason for why you're doing it. And I should mention that there's a lot of luck involved. At the time, I was running a business that I had been running for the past 8 years, and it was we had started it in Denver and then spread it across the wide metro
Mm-hmm.
area to Colorado Springs and Boulder. But we were delivering healthy snacks to businesses. That was a
Sure.
concept that didn't exist before. I mean, this is before Amazon bought Whole Foods and before, delivery to your house was commonplace. And we grew that business. It was a really physically challenging business. But for a number of reasons, we decided to sell right before COVID. So, I mean, it ended up being like the best, luckiest decision that I could have ever made. But it was a really, really difficult thing to go through. And you have to really understand why you're doing it so you can be motivated. So understanding, what your goal is with it. And really being clear about like what you're kind of going into it, what you're willing to take and what you're not willing to take. But the next thing that I would say that was so important to me is just having a group of advisors around you that you honestly trust. And I, through my Vistage group, was able to find an excellent transaction lawyer. Through my own experiences, I had a number of investment bankers that I could just leverage to ask questions of. And so I never felt like I was going through the process on my own. And I had a lot of people to continually ask questions of and just, keep asking them, does this make sense? Is this the right way to approach it? So that when I got through the process, I really thought that I did the best of that process that I could have done.
Cool. I mean, that's a lot of people will say that exiting their business was one of the hardest things that they've ever done. A lot of chairs that have been on this podcast have said that starting their first Vistage group, was the hardest thing by a long margin that they've ever done. You're in it right now. What has this process taught you so far, as you are going through it, and you've got five, maybe six ready to go, and I think eight is the magic number. What have
Magic
you
starting
what have
point.
you learned, as how has this process changed you as you've been going through it?
Yeah, two things come to mind right away. The first, I think, is obvious that it really requires discipline, like more discipline than I thought, because there is a lot of this that I don't love doing. And it's the research and it's the sales outreach and management part of it. It just takes a lot of work and discipline. And so you have to be prepared for that. I don't think I was prepared as much as I could have been, but so discipline. The other side of that, like, what have I learned about myself? I've read so many leadership books in the last like 6 months. I can't even tell you. And, they all really come down to the same thing, which is that you can't lead other leaders without really leading yourself and really knowing what your true north is, what your compass is, what your values are. And, I think we can get really far in life without, really solidly knowing those. And it's been a real pleasure for me to get really close to those for myself.
One thing that I would say that is really, really important for chairs, and heard it a lot again on this podcast, is that realization that, and for some, they realize it going in. For some, it's more of a, oh, I didn't really think about this before. But the idea that it's not just about getting 8, 10, 12 plus people to sign on the dotted line to join your group. They've got to be the right people. How have you been going about trying to figure out, as you're sitting across the table from somebody, whether it's virtually like we're doing, or whether it's at a coffee shop, whenever you're meeting somebody and telling them about what you're building, what are you looking for that tells you whether somebody may or may not be a good fit?
Yeah. Well, this goes back to that curation process that I was talking about earlier when we started talking. It really is this it is a selection process, and it's a selection process on both sides. And what people are engaging in, or they have to be willing to engage in to even be considered, is entering into this really confidential space, and they have to enter into it willing to share themselves, and then willing to give of themselves for the other people that need their time and their attention and their perspective. And there are a lot of people that just really say, that's not for me. That time that you have to invest, which is, a full day a month, is a lot of time, for anyone. So that's really the first hurdle. Like, one, do they have the time that they're willing to invest in this? And then two, are they really willing to engage and share themselves and be willing to authentically engage in conversation with others? Like that right there is the filter.
And I would say that if you don't think that you have time to give one day a month to work on your business instead of dealing with the day-to-day BS, that about as clear an indication as possible that you
I
need
would
this.
agree with you. Yes, but they to a deeper, I guess, answer to your point earlier is that it's not that they just want to be part of the group. They have to really understand that it requires for them to kind of take off their coat at the door and sit down at the table and roll their sleeves up so that they are there for themselves and for everyone else sitting around the table with them.
What's something that you would really want? So as people are, and I know sometimes when you talk to folks, they don't know what Vistage is and they don't know what a peer group is. But no matter where somebody is in the process, what's something that you want those people to know about you that you think makes you different, or that's going to make the dynamic of the group different?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I think my origin story is a little bit different. I think just being exposed to, how challenging small business is, and yet, what an amazing honor it is to run a small business, to employ, people in your community, to bring new products to market that add value to people, to do that in a way that you can then scale and continue to grow your value and your footprint. I mean, I think that's a really incredible honor that I feel personally and have experienced it. And then I've done it myself. There are a lot of amazing Vistage
Yeah.
chairs that have come from different experiences, and I think those are valuable too. But I think my entrepreneurial and startup experience in the trenches just gives me a perspective and, frankly, a humility and a compassion that will, I think, connect with the people in my group and allow me to help the whole group connect in ways that are really powerful.
And not just to have the honor of being a small business person and being an entrepreneur, but there's also a certain amount of honor in witnessing failure in small business and entrepreneurial efforts. Um, that's a really big deal too.
Yeah. I think that is a really big part of what the group experience is. You cannot grow as a person or as a leader if you don't challenge yourself. And if you're always winning in those challenges, they're not really challenges. And so, this is a forum where you can bring your quote failure, which is not really a failure, to the group, and they can help you see what you have learned from it, in addition to what I'm sure you've already known that you're learning from it. But those are learning experiences that everyone benefits from. And I don't see them as failures. I just see it as forward momentum. And you have to have that in order to grow.
Yeah, that's absolutely 100% true, and I think that was really well said. Well, Melissa, we're running out of time. I really appreciate you being here and being my guest. This has been awesome. If if folks have questions about you, about your group, about how you manage to sell an office delivery business right before COVID, what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn under Melissa Edison Barnes. And you can reach me directly through my Vistage email, which is melissa.edisonbarnes@vistagechair.com.
Very cool. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Eric. It's been such a pleasure. I really appreciate you having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Chairwaves. You can subscribe to our feed using Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your platform of choice. You can also visit chairwaves.com for more information. Chairwaves is hosted and produced by me, Eric Wolf, and to connect with me, you can visit my website at ewolf.live. That's EWOLF.live. And a disclaimer, while I love Vistage and CEO peer groups, this podcast is not owned by or affiliated with Vistage or any other peer organization. Thanks for listening.